There was a moment, you remember it clearly, don't you? A moment when everything seemed to be aligning, when the path felt right, the timing felt perfect, and your heart whispered, "This is it." You stepped forward with hope. You invested your energy. You opened your spirit. You trusted the process. And then, without warning, the door slammed shut. No explanation. No closure. No second chance. Just silence. And it didn't just confuse you, it shook you. Because you weren't expecting rejection. You were expecting arrival. You weren't preparing for loss, you were preparing for breakthrough. And suddenly, everything you thought was meant for you vanished. That opportunity, that relationship, that plan, that dream. It slipped through your hands like it was never yours to hold. You asked questions no one could answer. Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? Why would God bring me this far just to take it away? And if you're honest, there was a moment, maybe more than one, where you felt abandoned. Where you felt like heaven had gone silent right when you needed it to speak the loudest. But listen carefully, because this is where the truth begins to unfold. What if that door didn't close against you but for you? What if that sudden rejection wasn't punishment but protection? What if the very thing you cried over was the very thing heaven was saving you from? You didn't see what was behind that door. You couldn't. Because not everything is meant to be revealed before it is removed. There are battles that never reach your eyes. There are dangers that never touch your life. Not because they weren't real, but because they were intercepted. And in that unseen moment, while you were questioning, while you were hurting, while you were trying to make sense of the silence, something powerful was happening beyond your understanding. A divine interruption. A heavenly intervention. Archangel Michael, warrior of light, protector of destiny, was already moving. You thought the delay meant denial. You thought the silence meant absence. You thought the closure meant failure. But what if it was a rescue? Think about it. How many times have you looked back at something you once begged for and later realized it would have destroyed your peace? How many times did you chase something so hard, only to discover later that it was never aligned with who you were becoming? And yet this time felt different. This time, it hurt deeper. This time, it confused you more. This time, it made you question everything. Because this wasn't just a missed opportunity. It felt like a stolen future. But hear this now, not as coincidence, not as imagination, but as divine revelation. That door did not close randomly. It was sealed. Sealed by the hand of God. Sealed by divine authority. Sealed by protection you did not yet understand. And the reason it had to close so suddenly, so completely, so painfully is because if it had stayed open even a little longer, you would have walked straight into something you were never meant to survive. Yes, you heard that correctly. There was something behind that door. Something hidden. Something disguised. Something dangerous. It didn't look like destruction. It didn't feel like a threat. It came dressed as opportunity, as connection, as the next step. But beneath the surface it carried consequences your spirit was not meant to carry. And so heaven stepped in, not gently, not gradually, but decisively. Because sometimes, when your heart is too invested, God doesn't nudge you away. He pulls you out. And that pull feels like loss. That pull feels like rejection. That pull feels like everything falling apart. But in the realm of the spirit, it was everything falling into place. Archangel Michael speaks now, not softly, but with authority that cuts through your confusion. You mourned what I removed, not knowing I was shielding you from what was coming. You were not rejected. You were redirected. You were not denied. You were defended. And even now, as you sit with the memory of that closed door, there is something within you beginning to shift. A realization, a stirring, a quiet knowing that maybe, just maybe, what felt like the end was actually a rescue you did recognize. Stay with this message, because what you're about to uncover next will reveal what was truly waiting behind that door, and why heaven refused to let you step through it. Type "I trust the closed door" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 2727 is now surrounding your life. You felt it like a wound you couldn't explain. Not just disappointment, but something deeper. Something that lingered in your chest long after the door closed. It wasn't just the loss of an opportunity. It was the loss of what you believed that opportunity would become. You had already imagined the outcome. You had already stepped into the future in your mind. You had already started to align your identity with what was on the other side of that door. And when it closed, it didn't just take the opportunity. It took the version of yourself you thought you were about to become. That is why it hurt the way it did. That is why it stayed with you. That is why, even now, a part of you still wonders, what if it had worked out? But listen closely, because this is where your understanding must shift if you are going to walk in truth and not in regret. What you called rejection was never rejection. It was interception. It was heaven stepping into your path at the exact moment you were about to walk too far into something that did not carry your destiny. It carried your distraction. And because your heart was already invested, because your mind had already justified it, because your emotions had already attached to it, God did not ask for your permission to remove it. He acted. Immediately. Decisively. Without explanation. And that is what made it feel so personal. You interpreted the silence as abandonment. You interpreted the closed door as failure. You interpreted the redirection as a sign that you weren't good enough, ready enough, or worthy enough. But the truth, the real truth, is this: God was not rejecting you. He was rejecting what was trying to attach itself to you. There is a difference, and that difference changes everything. Because when God rejects something, it is not because it lacks value in general. It is because it lacks alignment with your specific calling. What looks right on the surface can still be wrong in the spirit. What feels good in the moment can still carry consequences that unfold over time. And what appears to be a blessing can sometimes be a perfectly disguised burden. You didn't see the misalignment. You couldn't see the long-term weight it would place on your life. You couldn't see the way it would slowly pull you out of alignment with who you are meant to become. But heaven saw it clearly. Archangel Michael saw it clearly. And that is why the intervention had to be strong enough to break your attachment. Because if it had been gentle, you would have held on. If it had been gradual, you would have negotiated. If it had been uncleared, you would have tried to reopen it. So the door didn't just close. It locked. Not to punish you, but to protect you from your own willingness to walk into something that felt right but was not righteous for your path. You see, there are moments in life where your desire and your destiny do not match. Where what you want and what you are called to carry begin to separate. And in those moments, God will always choose your destiny, even if it means disappointing your desire. And that disappointment feels like rejection. But it is actually divine intervention. Is heaven stepping in front of something before it can step into your life and take root. It is protection disguised as loss. It is guidance disguised as confusion. It is love expressed in a way that does not always feel gentle, but is always intentional. Think about how close you were. Closer than you realize. One more conversation. One more step. One more decision. And you would have crossed into something that would have cost you more than you were prepared to pay. Not immediately. Not obviously. But slowly, subtly, over time, your peace would have been compromised. Your clarity would have been clouded. Your purpose would have been delayed. And you would have looked back one day, wondering how you ended up somewhere that never truly felt right. That is what was intercepted. That is what was stopped. That is what was removed before it could become your reality. And now Archangel Michael speaks with clarity that leaves no room for doubt. You saw rejection. I saw the path ahead, and I refused to let you walk it. You were not pushed away. You were pulled out. You were not denied. You were defended. And the moment you truly understand this, the pain begins to transform. It does not disappear instantly, but it shifts. It softens. It loses its power over your identity. Because you no longer see yourself as someone who lost something. You begin to see yourself as someone who was spared from something. And that realization is the beginning of your freedom. Because once you accept that what left your life was not meant to stay, you stop trying to recreate it. You stop chasing what already showed you it was not aligned. You stop questioning your worth based on something that was never designed to carry your future. Instead, you begin to trust, not blindly, not passively, but with a deeper awareness that even the painful moments in your life are not random. They are guided. They are intentional. They are part of a protection you are only now beginning to understand. And this is only the beginning. Because what you're about to uncover next will reveal the exact nature of the danger that was hidden behind that door, and why its removal was not just necessary, but urgent. Type "I accept divine redirection" in the comments if you receive this truth. Blessing code 3939 is now activated over your path. There is something you must understand now, something that may shake you at first, but will ultimately set you free. You were not just being redirected. You were being removed. Removed from something that did not reveal its true nature while you were standing in front of it. Because if it had shown you everything at once, if you had seen the full picture, the full consequence, the full weight of what was waiting behind that door, you would not have hesitated. You would have run. But that is not how deception works. Deception does not introduce itself as danger. It introduces itself as opportunity. It speaks in a voice that sounds familiar. It carries a feeling that feels right. It aligns just enough with your desires to make you lower your guard. And that is exactly why it was so difficult for you to recognize what was truly there. Because what stood behind that door did not look like destruction. It looked like progress. It looked like connection. It looked like something you had been waiting for. And yet, beneath that surface there was something else forming. Something hidden. Something patient. Something that would not have revealed itself until you were already too far in to easily walk away. That is the danger you were never meant to see. Because some dangers are not immediate. They are gradual. They unfold over time. They entangle you slowly. They reshape your thinking, your priorities, your environment, until one day you realize you are no longer where you were meant to be, but by then, the cost of leaving feels too high. That is what with waiting. Not a sudden collapse, but a slow misalignment. Not an obvious threat, but a subtle shift. Not something that would break you instantly, but something that would wear you down, piece by piece, until your clarity, your peace, and your purpose were no longer intact. You would have adapted to it. You would have justified it. You would have told yourself it was part of the process. And that is what made it so dangerous. Because the most destructive paths are not the ones that look dark in the beginning. They are the ones that look just right, until they are not. Archangel Michael reveals this truth with piercing clarity. What you were walking toward had an outcome you could not see, but I could. And I will not allow what is assigned to destroy your alignment to take root in your life. There were elements behind that door that did not carry your best interest. Conversations that would have shifted your direction. Influences that would have reshaped your thinking. Attachments that would have altered your priorities. And slowly, without even realizing it, you would have started becoming someone different, someone further away from the path you were called to walk. This is not about fear. This is about awareness. Because what you lost was not just an opportunity, it was an entry point into something that would have demanded more from you than it was ever meant to give back. It would have taken your energy. It would have taken your focus. It would have taken your time. And in return, it would have given you confusion disguised as growth. That is the exchange you were being pulled away from. And the reason it had to be sudden, the reason it had to feel final, is because if it had remained open, you would have kept returning to it. You would have kept reconsidering it. You would have kept trying to make it work, even when it was quietly working against you. That is why heaven closed it completely. Not partially, not temporarily, but decisively, because partial closure leaves room for negotiation, and this was never meant to be negotiated. It was meant to be ended. You may not know the exact form the danger would have taken. You may never see the full extent of what was prevented, and that is part of the protection. Because not every truth needs to be revealed in detail for it to be real in impact. Some protections are silent. Some rescues leave no visible evidence. Some interventions only make sense when you look back and realize how different your life could have been if things had gone the way you once wanted them to. And one day you will see it. One day you will encounter something, an outcome, a situation, a version of events, and you will recognize that it mirrors what you almost stepped into. And in that moment, everything will become clear. You will understand why it had to close. You will understand why it could not continue. You will understand why what felt like loss was actually preservation. Archangel Michael stands firm in this truth. I closed what you could not see clearly, because your future is too valuable to be compromised by what only looked right for a moment. And now, you are standing in a space that feels uncertain but is actually protected. You are in a place where the wrong thing has already been removed, even if the right thing has not yet fully appeared. This is the space between closure and revelation, and it requires trust, because the danger has already passed. Even if you never fully saw it. Type "I trust" what was removed in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 5151 is now surrounding your path. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand this: every time a message like this reaches a soul, a hidden danger is exposed, a life is redirected, and a destiny is preserved. This is not just content. It is light breaking into places where confusion once lived. Scripture declares, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And right now, that light is moving through this very message into hearts that need it most. If something within you is stirring, if you feel this message was not slucha but divine timing, then this is your moment to respond. I feel led to say this clearly. When you sow into this mission, you are helping someone else avoid a door that could have destroyed them. Your giving becomes a shield in another person's life, a warning they might not have received otherwise. The PayPal link is in the description, and a QR code is right there on your screen. This is your opportunity to act in alignment. Step into obedience, release your seed, and watch how heaven multiplies what you have placed in His hands. There is a truth that must be spoken now with clarity, with authority, and without compromise, because this is where many lose what they were once protected from. Not at the moment the door closeth, but at the moment they try to reopen it. You have to understand this deeply. Not every closed door is meant to be revisited. Not every ending is meant to be questioned. Not every loss is meant to be reversed. And yet, there is a part of you, quiet, persistent, emotional, that still wonders if maybe, just maybe, you should try again. Maybe it was just bad timing. Maybe something could be fixed. Maybe you misunderstood what happened. Maybe, if you approach it differently, the outcome will change. And this is exactly where the danger begins to re-enter. Because what God has closed with intention, the human heart will often try to reopen with emotion. Archangel Michael speaks now with unmistakable firmness. Do not return to what I remove. What was closed was not temporary, it was necessary. There is a reason the closure felt final. There is a reason the access was cut off. There is a reason things ended the way they did, without clarity, without control, without your ability to shape the outcome. Because if you had been given more room, you would have used it to stay. If you had been given another chance, you would have used it to try again. If you had been given partial access, you would have used it to remain connected. And that connection would have slowly pulled you back into the very thing you were just rescued from. This is why the closure had to be complete. Because incomplete endings invite revisiting. And revisiting invites reattachment. And reattachment invites repetition. You would not be stepping into something new. You would be stepping back into something already proven to be misaligned. But this time, it would cost you more. Because once you have been shown the truth, even partially, and you choose to ignore it, the consequences no longer come from ignorance. They come from decision. And that is a weight you were never meant to carry. This is not about punishment. This is about protection that requires your cooperation. Because heaven can close a door, but it will not force you to stay away from it. That part is yours. That choice is yours. That discipline is yours. And this is where many fall, not because they were not protected, but because they did not honor the protection once it was given. They go back. They revisit. They reopen conversations, connections, opportunities that were clearly removed. And at first, it feels familiar, comforting even, like something unfinished is finally being resolved. But what they don't realize is that the same energy, the same misalignment, the same hidden danger is still present, only now. It is met with less resistance because it has already gained access once before. And so the cycle begins again. But deeper, stronger, harder to escape. Archangel Michael warns with precision. The second entry is always more binding than the first. What you escaped once will not release you as easily if you choose to return. This is why you must be still now. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You must resist the urge to romanticize what has already been removed. Because memory has a way of editing reality. It highlights the good. It softens the warning signs. It replays the moments that felt right and minimizes the ones that felt wrong. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to question the very protection that saved you. You begin to think maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe it could work. Maybe you gave up too soon. But listen carefully, because this is where clarity must override emotion. If it was meant to remain, it would not have been removed. If it was aligned, it would not have collapsed. If it was safe, it would not have required divine intervention to end it. You are not missing out. You are being kept out of something that does not belong in your future. And your willingness to accept that is what keeps you protected. Because the enemy of your next season is not always something new. Sometimes it is something old trying to regain access. Something familiar trying to reattach itself. Something comfortable trying to convince you that it still has a place in your life. But it does not. At its moment, it revealed its nature, and it was removed for a reason. Now, your responsibility is not to understand every detail of why it ended. Your responsibility is to honor the ending, to respect the closure, to trust that what you cannot see fully has already been seen clearly by the one who closed it. Archangel Michael stands in final warning. Do not knock on doors I have sealed. Your future is not behind you. It is ahead. And every step backward delays what is already being prepared for you. You are not being restricted. You are being redirected. And the more you resist looking back, the clearer your path forward becomes. Because what is ahead of you does not require you to return to what was removed. It requires you to release it completely. Type "I will not go back" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 6262 is now activated over your decisions and direction. There is something you did not see, something you were never meant to witness with your physical eyes, because if you had, it would have overwhelmed you. While you were standing in confusion, while you were questioning, while you were trying to make sense of why everything suddenly stopped, there was a battle taking place. Not in the visible world, but in the spiritual realm. And it was not small. It was not symbolic. It was real. Because the moment you began moving toward that door, something in the unseen recognized what was at stake. Not just your next step, but your direction. Not just your decision, but your destiny. And when destiny is involved, the spiritual realm does not remain silent. It responds. Archangel Michael reveals this now with unwavering authority. What looked like a simple opportunity to you carried consequences that required intervention. And so, I was sent. You thought you were just making a choice. But heaven saw a crossing point. A moment where one decision could shift the course of your life in ways you were not prepared to recover from. And so, before that step could be completed, something had to happen. A confrontation. Not with people. Not with circumstances. But with forces you could not see. There are assignments in the spiritual realm, some meant to guide, others meant to distract. And what stood behind that door carried an assignment that was not aligned with your calling. It was subtle. It was disguise. But it was present. And it had a purpose. To delay you. To redirect you away from what was truly meant for you. To entangle you in something that would slowly disconnect you from clarity, from peace, from purpose. That is why the battle began before you even realized it. Because what you were stepping toward was not neutral. It was contested. And Archangel Michael, as a protector of divine alignment, does not stand passively when something threatens what hath been written over your life. He moves decisively, strategically, with authority that does not negotiate with misalignment. There were things being blocked that you never knew were coming. Paths being closed that you never saw forming. Conversations being interrupted. Timings being shifted. Access being removed. All of it intentional. All of it precise. Because in the spirit, delay is not always denial. It is often protection in motion. And what felt like everything falling apart in your world was actually everything being held together in a way you could not yet understand. You may have felt resistance. You may have felt like things were not flowing the way they should. You may have sensed that something was off, even when everything looked right on the surface. That was not confusion. That was friction. friction created by a spiritual boundary being placed between you and something that was not meant to continue. Because when heaven intervenes, it does not always announce itself with clarity. It often shows up as disruption. Plans that suddenly stop working, connections that suddenly shift, opportunities that suddenly collapse. And in those moments, it feels like loss. But what it really is protection taking form. Archangel Michael speaks again, with a tone that carries both strength and reassurance. You were not left alone in that moment. I stood between you and what was not meant to reach you. What you experienced as a closed door was a result of a battle already won on your behalf. It is what you must understand now. The outcome you saw, the door closing, was not the battle. It was the result of the battle. The decision had already been made in the spiritual realm before it ever manifested in your reality. You were not reacting to loss. You were witnessing protection. And the reason it felt so sudden, so final, so unchangeable is because once the decision was secured, there was no longer any reason for the door to remain open. It had served its purpose. It revealed what it needed to reveal. And then it was removed. Not because you failed, but because you were defended. There are moments in life where you are fighting to understand something that heaven has already resolved. Moments where you are trying to reopen something that has already been closed with authority. Moments where you are asking questions about something that has already been decided in your favor. And this was one of those moments. You were not in a position of loss. You were in a position of coverage. Covered from what could have entered your life. Covered from what could have taken root. Covered from what could have altered your path in ways that would have taken far longer to correct. And now, as you stand here, looking back at that closed door, you are not standing in confusion anymore. You are standing in awareness. Because the battle has already been fought. The outcome has already been secured. And what was meant to reach you did not. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was sub. Type I am protected in the unseen in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7474 is now surrounding your path and your purpose. There is a question that has been sitting quietly in your spirit, even as you begin to understand everything that has been revealed so far. If this was protection, if this was divine intervention, if this was necessary, then why did it have to hurt so much? Why did it feel like something was taken from you instead of something being saved for you? Why did the closure come with such emotional weight, such confusion, such a deep sense of loss that lingered long after the moment had passed? This is where the truth becomes even deeper and more personal. Because what was removed was not just the door. It was your attachment to what you believed was on the other side of it. And attachment does not break quietly. It does not dissolve without resistance. It does not release without feeling like something inside you is being pulled apart. That is why it hurt. Not because the door itself was meant for you, but because your heart had already begun to build something around it. You had already started to see yourself there. You had already formed expectations, imagined outcomes, created emotional connections to something that had not yet fully materialized. And when that is interrupted, it does not feel like protection. It feels like loss. But listen carefully, because this is where understanding must replace emotion. God does not remove things from your life without also removing the hold they have on you. And sometimes the only way to break that hold is to allow you to feel the weight of its release. Archangel Michael speaks now with clarity that reaches directly into that place where the pain once lived. What you felt was not the loss of your future. It was the breaking of a connection that could not go with you where you are being led. There are things that cannot follow you into your next season. Not because they are bad in general, but because they are not aligned with who you are becoming. and if they are not aligned, they cannot remain. But the challenge is this: your heart does not always recognize misalignment immediately. Your heart responds to familiarity, to potential, to emotion. It attaches before it fully understands. And so, when something is removed before your heart has caught up with the truth, it creates a gap, a space where your emotions are still holding on to something that your destiny has already released. That space is where the pain lives. That space is where the confusion forms. That space is where you begin to question everything. But that space is also temporary, because eventually truth catches up. Eventually clarity arrives. Eventually you begin to see what your emotions could not understand in the moment. And when that happens, the pain shifts. It no longer feels like something was taken from you. It begins to feel like something was lifted off of you. Because what you thought you lost, you were actually being freed from. Freed from a path that would have required you to compromise. Freed from a connection that would have slowly drained you. Freed from a situation that would have demanded more from you than it was ever meant to give. But in order for that freedom to take place, the attachment had to break. And breaking is not painless. It is not gentle. It is not always understood in the moment. It feels like resistance. It feels like being pulled away from something you were moving toward. It feels like interruption. But what it truly is separation for the sake of preservation. Because if it had not hurt, you might have gone back. If it had not been final, you might have tried again. If it had not felt like a clear ending, you might have kept the connection alive, even in small ways. And those small connections would have led you right back into what you were meant to be removed from. That is why it had to feel the way it did. Not to harm you, but to break the hold completely, so that there would be nothing left pulling you backward when it is time for you to move forward. Archangel Michael continues with a message that settles the weight of this truth. I did not allow the pain to remain. I allowed it to pass through you, so that what could not stay would not follow you. You were not meant to carry that pain permanently. You were meant to move through it, to feel it, to process it, and then to release it. Because once the attachment is broken, the clarity begins to rise. And when clarity rises, you begin to see the situation differently. You begin to notice things you overlooked. You begin to recognize signs you ignored. You begin to understand why it could not continue. And in that moment, the pain loses its power. Because you are no longer holding on to the idea of what could have been. You are standing in the awareness of what was never meant to be. And that awareness is what sets you free. You are not broken because it hurt. You are being prepared because it ended. And what lies ahead of you will not require that kind of pain to remain. Type "I release the attachment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8585 is now activated over your healing in your heart. Now that you have begun to understand why the door closed, now that you are starting to see the protection behind the pain, there is something else that must be revealed. Not to bring you guilt, not to make you question yourself, but to sharpen your awareness moving forward. Because the truth is, the closure was not the first signal. It was the final one. Before that door closed, there were signs. Subtle, quiet, easy to overlook if your heart was already invested. Moments that did not fully make sense at the time. Feelings you brushed off. Thoughts you dismissed. A sense, deep inside, that something was not fully aligned, but you kept moving forward anyway. Not because you were careless, but because you were hopeful. Hope can be powerful, but when it is placed in something misaligned, it can also cause you to ignore what your spirit is trying to show you. Archangel Michael reveals this now with calm but unmistakable clarity. I spoke to you before the door closed. Not in words you could hear with your ears, but in signals your spirit recognized even when your mind chose to overlook them. Think back. There were moments where something felt slightly off. Conversations that didn't sit right, even if you couldn't explain why. Delays that disrupted what should have been smooth. Inconsistencies that you noticed but chose to give the benefit of the doubt. A sense of hesitation that appeared without reason. That quiet inner pause, that subtle resistance, that feeling of something is not right here. Those were not random. That was not overthinking. That was not fear. That was discernment. But discernment does not force itself. It presents itself. And then it waits. It waits for you to listen or to continue. And at that moment you continued. Not because you were wrong, but because you had not yet seen enough to fully trust what you were feeling. So the signs remain subtle. Because subtle signs give you the opportunity to choose awareness. But when awareness is not chosen, the signs become stronger. And eventually they become action. That action was the door closing. Because when the signals are not enough to redirect you, intervention becomes necessary. You may have noticed things that didn't align, but you explained them away. You told yourself it was just timing, just misunderstanding, just something that would resolve itself. And in doing so, you stayed open to something that was quietly showing you it was not meant to remain. This is not about blame. This is about growth. Because now you can recognize those same signals in the future. Now you can trust what you feel earlier. Now you can respond before something reaches the point where it has to be removed completely. Because the purpose of those early signs was not to confuse you. It was to guide you. To give you a chance to step back before you stepped too far in. To give you a moment of awareness before attachment fully formed. But when those moments pass, the next step is no longer suggestion. It becomes decision. And that decision was made for your protection. Archangel Michael speaks again, bringing this truth into full clarity. You were not unaware. You were unready to accept what you were already sensing. And so, I completed what your spirit began to reveal. There is a difference between not knowing and not yet accepting what you know. You felt something. You recognized something. But you were not ready to fully act on it. So heaven stepped in. Not because you failed, but because you were still learning. Learning how to trust what you feel. Learning how to recognize misalignment without needing full proof. Learning how to walk away from something that looks right but does not feel right. And now that lesson is complete. You no longer need the door to close to confirm what you sense. You no longer need things to fall apart to recognize what is not aligned. You can see it earlier. You can feel it sooner. You can respond with clarity before it reaches the point of intervention. This is where your awareness becomes protection. Because the next time something presents itself that is not aligned, it will not need to be removed from you. You will choose to step away from it. That is growth. That is alignment. That is the shift that turns you from someone who reacts to life into someone who discerns it. And as you move forward now, you carry something you did not have before. Not just experience, but clarity. Clarity that allows you to recognize what is meant for you and what only appears to be. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final truth for this moment. The signs will always come before the separation. Learn to trust them, and you will walk in alignment before intervention is ever required again. Type "I trust my discernment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9696 is now activated over your awareness and your decisions. There is a deeper layer to this, something you must fully grasp if you are going to walk forward without repeating what always took hold of your path. Because what stood before you was not just a door. It was a disguise. A carefully formed presentation that appeared to align with your desires, your timing, your expectations, but beneath that surface, it carried something entirely different. It was a trap. Not obvious, not loud, not something that would have immediately raised alarm, because traps that are easy to see are easy to avoid. The ones that are dangerous are the ones that feel right. That is what made this so convincing. It looked like progress. It felt like movement. It resembled something you had been waiting for. And because it matched what you were hoping for, you allowed yourself to trust it before fully discerning it. Archangel Michael reveals this truth with precision. What appears as opportunity is not always aligned with purpose, and what aligns with desire is not always sent for your destiny. You must understand this difference now, because not everything that opens is meant for you to walk through. Not everything that feels good is meant to remain. Not everything that presents itself as a step forward is actually leading you in the right direction. Some things are designed to pull you off course while making you believe you are moving closer. That is the nature of a disguised trap. It does not force you. It invites you. It draws you in slowly. It allows you to step closer, to engage, to invest until you are no longer standing at the entrance, but already inside. And once you are inside, it becomes harder to leave. Because now your time is involved. Now your energy is invested. Now your emotions are attached. And that attachment begins to override your discernment. That is how the trap works. Not through immediate harm, but through gradual entanglement. You would not have noticed it at first. Nothing would have seemed wrong in the beginning. In fact, it may have felt like confirmation. Like things were finally aligning, like you were stepping into something meaningful. But over time things would have shifted. Subtly, quietly. You would have started adjusting yourself to maintain it, compromising in small ways, ignoring what didn't feel right, convincing yourself that everything was fine even when your spirit began to feel unsettled. And slowly you would have moved further away from your alignment without realizing it. That is the danger of what was hidden. Not destruction in a single moment, but disconnection over time. Archangel Michael speaks again, with a tone that carries both warning and protection. You were not meant to adapt to what was not designed for you. I removed it before it could reshape you, because that is what would have happened. You would have adapted. You would have made it work. You would have found ways to justify staying even when it was no longer aligned. And that adaptation would have cost you your clarity. It would have cost you your peace. It would have cost you your direction. But because the door closed when it did, none of that took place. You were not given the chance to fully enter the trap. You were stopped at the threshold. And that is what saved you. You may not have seen the structure of it. You may not know exactly how it would have unfolded. But you do not need to. Because the outcome has already been prevented. And now you are no longer standing in front of something that could entangle you. You are standing free from something that could have delayed you. This is where your understanding must deepen. Because as you move forward, similar opportunities will appear again. Not the same one, but similar in nature. Similar in how they present themselves. Similar in how they feel at first. And this time you will recognize them differently. You will not be guided only by how something looks or how it feels in the moment. You will be guided by alignment, by clarity, by the ability to pause and truly discern what is in front of you. Because now you know this truth. Just because something opens does not mean it is yours. Just because something feels right does not mean it is aligned. Just because something looks like progress does not mean it is leading you forward. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final warning and instruction. Discern what is presented to you, not by appearance, but by alignment. What is meant for you will not require you to lose yourself to keep it. You were protected from a trap, and now you carry the awareness to never walk into one again. Type "I discern what is true" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8080 is now activated over your path and your decisions. As you recognize how close you were to something that could have quietly derailed your path, understand this: every message like this becomes a light placed on someone else's hidden road. There are souls right now standing at doors that look like blessings but carry unseen weight, and this message is the warning that can redirect them before it's too late. The word says, "Those who sow in righteousness will reap a harvest of life." And right now, your action can become that seed in someone else's moment of decision. I feel led to say this clearly. When you give, you are not supporting a video. You are interrupting a trap in someone else's life. Your seed becomes protection. Your generosity becomes revelation. Your obedience becomes someone else's escape. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code is right there. This is your moment to act, not later, but now. Step forward in faith, release your seed, and watch how heaven multiplies what you have sown into purpose. Now comes the part your spirit hath been waiting for, the part that shifts everything from loss to purpose, from confusion to clarity, from questioning to understanding. Because the door did not just close to protect you, it closed to redirect you. And that redirection is not random. It is not a delay. It is not a detour without meaning. It is a precise movement, guided, intentional, and aligned with something greater than what you were about to step into. You were not pulled away just to stand still. You were pulled away to be repositioned. Archangel Michael speaks now with a tone that carries certainty. You were not removed from something good. You were moved toward something greater. But greater requires separation from what cannot reach that level with you. This is where your perspective must rise, because what you were about to enter, as convincing as it felt, was limited. It had a ceiling, a boundary, a point beyond which it could not grow with you. And had you stepped into it, you would have eventually reached that limit and felt stuck, constrained, unable to expand into who you are meant to become. But because the door closed, you were never confined by that limitation. You were released from it before it could define you. There is something ahead of you that requires more of you, not in a draining way, but in an expanding way. Something that aligns with your growth, your clarity, your purpose at a level you have not yet fully stepped into. And that level could not be reached if you remained attached to what was behind you. That is why the redirection had to happen now, not later. Not after you had gone further in, but at the exact moment where your path could still be shifted without needing to undo deeper consequences. You may feel like you are in between right now, between what is coming, between closure and clarity, between the familiar and the unknown. And that space can feel uncomfortable, because it does not yet have definition. It does not yet show you exactly what is ahead. It asks you to trust without full visibility. But this space is not empty. It is preparation. It is alignment taking place beneath the surface. It is where your path is being recalibrated so that when the next door opens, it does not just look right. It is right. Archangel Michael reveals this truth with unwavering assurance. What is being prepared for you will not require confusion to sustain it. It will not require compromise to maintain it. It will not require you to question your alignment to remain within it. That is the difference. What is meant for you will not feel like something you have to constantly justify. It will not carry the same subtle resistance you felt before. It will not require you to silence your discernment in order to stay connected to it. Instead, it will align, not perfectly in every moment, but clearly in its direction. clearly in His purpose, clearly in the way it allows you to remain who you are while still growing into who you are becoming. And this is why you must not rush this process, because rushing comes from fear. Fear that nothing else will come. Fear that you missed your chance. Fear that what you lost was your only opportunity. But that fear is not truth. That fear is simply the echo of attachment trying to convince you that what is gone was everything. It was not everything. It was simply something that could not go with you. What is ahead of you is not a replacement. It is an upgrade. Not in a superficial sense, but in alignment, in clarity, in purpose. And the only reason it has not fully revealed itself yet is because you are still transitioning out of what was removed. You are still releasing, still understanding, still shifting your perspective. And once that shift is complete, the next step will become visible. Not all at once, but clearly enough for you to move forward without confusion. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final assurance for this moment. You have not been set back. You have been set on the correct path. And what is ahead of you is not delayed. It is being prepared. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not without direction. You are in transition. And transition is where alignment is secured. So do not look back with regret. Do not question what was removed. Do not doubt what is coming, because what is coming will make the closure make sense. Type "I trust" where I am being LED in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9090 is now activated over your path, your timing, and your purpose. There is something that must be spoken now with complete seriousness, because this is where protection can be undone, not by force, but by choice. You have been removed. You have been redirected. You have been protected. But none of that eliminates your ability to return. And that is where the real test begins. Because once a door has been closed by God, it does not lose its memory in your mind. The thoughts remain. The curiosity lingers. The what if begins to whisper again, especially in moments when the future has not yet fully revealed itself. That whisper sounds familiar. It sounds reasonable. It even sounds harmless. But it carries a weight you must not ignore. Because going back is never neutral. It is not simply revisiting. It is re-entering. Re-entering something that has already been identified as misaligned. Reconnecting with something that has already been removed for a reason. Reopening access to something that was not meant to remain in your life. And the moment you do that, you are no longer under the same protection you once had in that situation. Not because protection is taken from you, but because you have stepped outside of it. Archangel Michael speaks now with unmistakable authority. What was closed was sealed for your safety. To reopen it is to step beyond the boundary that was placed to preserve you. You must understand what this means. When the door was first open, you were unaware. You were still learning. You had not yet seen or fully sensed what was hidden. And so, when heaven intervened, it covered you completely. But now you know. You may not know every detail, but you know enough. You know something was not right. You know something had to end. You know it was not aligned. And when you return to something you already know is misaligned, the consequences shift. They are no longer based on discovery. They are based on decision. And decisions carry weight. Because now, you are choosing familiarity over alignment. You are choosing comfort over clarity. You are choosing what feels known over what is truly meant for you. At first, it may not seem harmful. In fact, it may feel easier. You may feel a sense of relief, like something unresolved is finally being addressed. But that relief is temporary. Because what you are stepping back into has not changed. The same misalignment remains. The same hidden weight remains. The same underlying issues remain. And this time they will surface more quickly, more clearly, more intensely, because you are no longer unaware. Archangel Michael warns with precision. The return always reveals what was hidden the first time. What you avoided will become unavoidable if you choose to go back. This is why returning often feels heavier than the first experience, because now you can feel the misalignment more strongly. You can see the inconsistencies more clearly. You can sense the resistance more deeply. And yet because you chose to go back, it becomes harder to walk away again. Because now there is a layer of regret. A layer of knowing you had already been removed once and still returned. That is what creates entanglement. Not the situation itself, but the repeated choice to stay connected to it. And this is where many lose time. Not because they were never protected, but because they stepped back into something that required them to learn the same lesson again. But deeper, longer, with more effort required to release it. That is what you are being warned about now. Not to control you, not to restrict you, but to preserve what has already been secured. Because what is ahead of you cannot fully open if you are still holding on to what was behind you. You cannot walk forward while maintaining a connection to something that belongs to your past. You cannot step into alignment while keeping access open to misalignment. You cannot receive what is meant for you while still trying to revive what was removed. Archangel Michael leaves you with a final, direct instruction. Do not return to what I have already released from your life. Your future will not meet you there. This is your moment of decision. Not based on emotion. Not based on curiosity. But based on truth. You have been shown enough to move forward. You have been protected enough to trust the process. And now you must choose to honor what has already been done for you. Because protection is not only what removes you, it is also what keeps you from going back. Type "I choose forward" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010 is now activated over your path, your discipline, and your direction. There is something shifting now, something you may not fully see yet, but you can begin to feel it if you become still enough to recognize it. Because the story does not end with a closed door. It never did. A door closed is not the conclusion. It is the preparation. Preparation for something that does not just replace what was lost but surpasses it in every way that truly matters. You have spent time looking back, trying to understand why something ended. You have processed the pain, the confusion, the suddenness of it all. You have questioned, reflected, and slowly begun to accept that what was removed was not meant to remain. And now you are standing at a threshold again. But this time, it is different. This time, it is not something you are chasing. It is something being prepared for you. Archangel Michael speaks with a calm authority that carries certainty. The door that is coming will not need to convince you. It will confirm what your spirit already knows. That is how you will recognize it. And not through pressure, not through confusion, not through emotional urgency, but through clarity. A clarity that does not force you to question your alignment. A clarity that does not require you to silence your discernment. A clarity that allows you to move forward without feeling like you are negotiating with your own spirit. Because what is meant for you does not create internal conflict. It creates alignment. You will feel it differently. There will be a sense of steadiness, not chaos. A sense of peace, not pressure. A sense of direction, not confusion. It may not be perfect in appearance, but it will be clear in purpose. And that clarity is what separates it from what you almost stepped into before. Because what you almost entered required you to adjust yourself to fit it. What is coming will meet you where you are meant to be. It will not demand that you become smaller to sustain it. It will not require you to ignore what you feel to maintain it. It will not pull you away from your alignment. It will deepen it. This is what makes it different. And this is why it could not arrive while you were still connected to what had to be removed. Because you cannot hold on to two paths at once. You cannot remain attached to something that has already been closed and fully step into something that is about to open. There must be space. There must be release. There must be a moment where your hands are no longer holding on to what was so they can receive what is coming. And that moment is now. You may not see the full form of it yet. You may not know exactly how it will appear. But the preparation has already begun. Behind the scenes, beyond your visibility, in ways you cannot yet measure, things are being aligned, timing is being arranged, connections are being positioned, opportunities are being formed, and when the moment is right it will open, not partially, uncertainly, but clearly. Archangel Michael reveals this with unwavering assurance. What is coming will not be taken from you suddenly, because it will be built on alignment, not illusion. That is the difference. What was removed was unstable. What is coming is secure. What was closed created confusion. What is opening will bring clarity. What was behind you required you to question. What is ahead of you will allow you to move with confidence. But you must remain where you are now. In trust, in patience, in awareness, because impatience is what leads people back into what was already closed, back into what was already removed, back into something familiar simply because what is ahead has not yet fully appeared. Do not let that happen. Do not trade what is being prepared for what has already been released, because what is coming is not a repetition. It is a new alignment, a new direction, a new level of clarity that you did not have before. And when it arrives, you will understand. You will see why the other door had to close. You will recognize how different this feels. You will realize that what you thought you lost was never meant to compare to what you are about to receive. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final promise. The door that opens for you will not lead to confusion. It will lead to confirmation. And you will know, without doubt, that this is where you are meant to be. You are not waiting without reason. You are being positioned with precision. And what is ahead of you is already on its way. Type "I am ready for the NEW door" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1111 is now activated over your path, your timing, and your next beginning. And now the message comes to its final moment not as an ending, but as a commissioning. Because everything you have heard, everything you have felt, everything that has been revealed to you was never meant to leave you unchanged. You were not brought through this understanding just to reflect. You were brought here to respond. Because now, you know something you did not fully know before. You know that the closed door was not loss. You know that the pain was not punishment. You know that the confusion was not abandonment. You know that you were protected, redirected, and preserved even when it did not feel like it. And with that knowledge comes responsibility. Responsibility to move differently, to think differently, to respond differently when the next moment of decision comes into your life. Archangel Michael speaks now with final authority. You have been shown what many ignore. You have been protected in ways many do not recognize. Now you must walk with awareness, not assumption. This is your assignment. Not to fear doors, not to doubt opportunities, but to walk in alignment, to trust what you sense earlier, to honor what is revealed to you even when it is subtle, to not override your discernment just because something looks good. To not chase what feels urgent when your spirit feels unsettled. You are no longer where you once were. You are no longer someone who needs everything to fall apart to understand what is not aligned. You have been given clarity ahead of collapse. And that is a gift. But it is also a calling. Because now when something presents itself in your life, you will not only ask, "Is this good?" You will ask, "Is this aligned?" You will not only look at what is visible. You will pay attention to what is felt. You will not only consider what you want. You will consider where you are being led. That is how you protect what has been preserved. That is how you walk forward without repeating what has already been removed. Because your future requires a higher level of awareness than your past. And that awareness is now within you. But there is something else you must understand. The protection you experienced was not just about that one door. It was about your life. It was about your path. It was about ensuring that what is meant for you is not delayed by what is not. And that protection continues. Even now. Even as you move forward. Even as new doors begin to appear. You are not walking alone. You are not navigating blindly. You are being guided. But guidance requires cooperation. It requires you to listen. A pause. A trust. Even when the direction does not match your expectations. Even when the timing feels uncertain. Even when the path is not fully visible. Because the same hand that closed the wrong door is the same hand that will open the right one. And when that door opens, you must walk through it without hesitation. Not carrying the weight of what was behind you. Not comparing it to what you once thought you wanted. Not questioning whether you should go back. Because by then you will know. Not emotionally, but clearly, that this is where you are meant to be. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final declaration. You were not saved from one moment. You are being prepared for many. Walk forward in awareness, and what is meant for you will not pass you by. This is your assignment now. To move forward. To trust deeply. To release completely. And to walk in alignment with what has already been prepared for you. Because the door that closed was not the end of your story. It was the protection that ensured your story continues the way it was meant to. Type "I walk in divine alignment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now activated over your life, your path, and your future. As this message reaches its completion, understand this sacred truth. What you have just received is not just for you. It is meant to become a lifeline for others who are still standing in front of the wrong door. Every revelation shared, every warning released, every truth spoken becomes a seed planted into someone else's moment of confusion, guiding them back into alignment. The word declares, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and right now, your giving becomes that seed flowing into lives you may never see, but heaven will record every impact. I feel led to say this clearly. When you sow into this mission, you are not giving to a channel. You are helping heaven close the wrong doors in someone else's life before it's too late. Your obedience in this moment becomes someone else's protection, someone else's clarity, someone else's breakthrough. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code is right there. This is your moment to act with purpose, not delay. Step forward now, release your seed, and watch how God multiplies what you have sown into divine alignment and favor.